making a video about agricultural economics. It is one of the papers that you will find in Bangalore City University for economics students. This basically is for the fourth semester student of Bangalore City University. This paper actually has rural economy of India as its first chapter. Basically, or primarily consists of the structure of Indian economy, place of agriculture in Indian economy, composition of rural economy of India, farm and non-farm sectors of Indian economies. Basically, this includes the four different aspects of the topics of rural economy. We will be discussing about this in this video. To begin with the structure of Indian economy, as we all know, Indian economy is a developing economy. India has its own problems and issues in terms of its economy. We know basically it's an agrarian economy. More than 70% of the population are dependent on agriculture. Agriculture is the backbone of our economy, and we are facing a lot of issues like unemployment. We also have issues of poverty. We have issues of technical knowledge and skill, because we know that there are few people who have employment, but they basically lack in terms of their skills. Skills mainly gives them employment. So basically these are the many issues that we see in terms of Indian economy. So usually when we look into the history of economics, we find that there are three different phases of Indian economy. We divide them into three phases, namely first being the pre-colonial stage, second one being the colonial stage, and the third one being the post-colonial stage. In pre-colonial stage, we see that the phase between the Indus Valley civilization to 1700 AD as one pre-colonial stage. Basically, this time period is what we considered as pre-colonial stage. So during this phase, Indian economy was very well developed. It had a very good trade relationship with the rest of the world. Basically, all these things were happening in India even before the advent of East India Company into India. Why do we say that we were very happy, or we had a very good developed India? Because all the villages were self-sufficient. At that point of time, all villages were economically independent. So they were able to grow and get goods, or whatever was the requirement of them was easily fulfilled in the villages of India. So we call that as a very good phase of India, which was even before the advent of the British. Basically, it is during your Indus Valley civilization to 1700 AD. So moving to the colonial period, the arrival of East India Company in India has caused a lot of strain to the Indian economy. Basically, we all know how the East India Company tried to exploit the Indian economy by exploiting the natural resources, trying to forcibly sell their goods in India. So this has actually created a lot of issues in India, mainly that there was a depletion of resources happening in India. So there were two ways this happened. One was that British would buy the raw materials from India for a cheaper price. So we all know India was abundantly rich. We had a lot of natural resources. So those resources were easily available to the East India Company. So they took away all these resources from India for a very cheaper price, and they took it home, converted it into the finished goods, and once the finished goods was done, it was again brought back to India, and which was sold at an abnormal or a much higher price in all the Indian markets. So basically, it's our raw materials which they took it away, again brought it back to India, and was selling it for a very high price. Then we see the third phase, that is the post-colonial stage. So here, after after India got independence from the colonial rule in 1947, we had to rebuild our economy. There was a lot of process involved because we had to start from the scratch, and a lot of issues that happened. We know about the partition, the wars that India had to face and all that. So a lot of issues went into the planning policies. We had to look into bringing many new policies, and we had to formulate new schemes to bring about a recovered economy. So we had to push our economy towards recovery. So the Indian government started its first 5-year plan. We know India was following rather a 5-year plan. So the first 5-year plan was implemented in 1952, and we had this planning process. And we know when you go into the details of the planning, each planet had its own priority. One plan they would give a lot of importance to agriculture. Another plan there would be importance to industries, sometimes to small scale industries, and sometimes to large scale industries. So Indian government would plan and try to push those activities that were very essential or required at the need of the hour. And moving on, we see that Indian economy is basically classified into 3 sectors, that is primary sector, secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. So let's see how these 3 sectors contribute to the Indian economy and what these sectors actually made up of. So, primary sector includes anything to do with agriculture and its products. So basically it involves all the raw materials available in the market. So make use of the raw materials available in the market and try to give your goods. That is your primary sector. So agriculture sector is also changing because there is a lot of socio-economic and environmental changes happening. Liberalization, globalization has happened. So again, that has brought about a lot of change in terms of agriculture. And we all know we are basically dependent on agriculture for livelihood. So when you look into the contribution of agriculture to GDP in 2020-21, according to the economic survey, it has moved to 19.9%. So it's nearly almost 20% of India's GDP is from agriculture. And when you look into the various aspects of production, remember in history we have studied wherein India had to depend on someone coming and give you aid in terms of wheat. We were dependent on other nations to provide us food. So we had famine, we had a lot of issues. So basically we had a lot of trouble in terms of the government providing food to its own people. But now the entire scenario has changed. You look into the production, the scale, the magnitude, we see that we are the largest producer of milk, cashew nuts, coconut, tea, ginger, black pepper, etc. Second largest in terms of production of wheat, rice, and sugar. This is an achievement that we should be all proud of. And it comes to tobacco, we are the 3rd largest producer in the world. So I think we have to pat our bags because this was a great contribution happening, the change that happened in the primary sector with all the policy frameworks by the government, and also people contribute. So the secondary sector, it includes all those activities related to industry. Basically, you take all the raw materials from the primary sector and try to put it on to your secondary sector, that is your industrial sector, who try to convert it into finished goods. So industry is accounting for nearly 27.6% of GDP, and when it comes to employment from the industry, we find nearly 17% of the workforce are dependent on industries. So 1/3 of industrial labor force is engaged in simple household manufacturing. So you don't have to have a lot of technical knowledge or skill, just the simple household manufacturing. And textile manufacturing is the 2nd largest source of employment after agriculture, and this is nearly accounting for 26% of the manufacturing output. The third one is your tertiary sector. Here, India is 15th in terms of the services. So what exactly contributes to services? It is all those activities other than your agriculture and your finished goods or your industries It includes your services. It is basically your transport, transport, banking, insurance, hospitality, all these aspects, your IT sector, your BT, all these contributes to your tertiary sector. So India is ranking about 15th in terms of services, the service output globally, and the contribution of IT to GDP has also increased. So we were hardly giving about 4.8% in 2005 and 6. So this again has increased a lot to 7% in 2008 to about 59% of the total share of GDP as of now. So the main problem, however, in terms of tertiary sector we see is that the salary given to the labor force here, the service sector, is very less. So people are not attracted to go to these service sectors. So we all know the future remains with the tertiary sector. We want it to grow. We want it to provide a lot of employment. So we are keeping our fingers crossed that will let it accommodate and provide more employment opportunities. And when it comes to tourism, again, still it is in a developing stage, or trying to, people are trying to still get accustomed to taking this as a occupation or as a job availability. So it is still growing at a double digits, but not up to the mark. So main sectors that we see here include software sectors, petroleum, chemical construction, cement, transportation, leather, steel, textiles, etc. So when we try to conclude about these sectors and the structure, we see that there is a major shift in terms of the macroeconomic policies in the decade of the 90s. So this accelerated the pace of structural transformation of the Indian economy. So this set India on a high growth trajectory. So we all know we had a lot of plans, we had tried to push it with different aspects of small scale industry, large scale industry, few plans basically for agriculture and all that. We also saw nationalization of banks and a lot of changes happening in Indian economy over a period of time. But globalization, liberalization brought a major change in terms of our economy. So the average growth rate and the performance in the 90s, it actually brought a lot of change. It improved compared to the 80s. While both the industries and service sectors registered heavy growth rates during this period of 90s, agriculture and allied activities also experienced relatively a low rate of growth compared to the 80s. So overall, it was on a positive note that we try to see proper policies can bring about improvement, development happening in all the sectors of Indian economy. This underlies a major structural shift in the Indian economy in the recent years, with economic growth becoming more vulnerable to the performance of industrial and service sectors and less to the performance of the agricultural sector. In order to keep the momentum of the structural transformation of the Indian economy, investment should be concentrated to those sectors which are strongly integrated with the rest of the economy and have a large multiplier effect on growth and development. So we'll be discussing about the place of agriculture in Indian economy. So when we come to the place of agriculture in Indian economy, we find India's rural economy has traditionally been associated with agriculture, and India is primarily an agrarian society with 2/3 of its population living in rural areas. So agriculture and related activities are the main source of livelihood for them, and the performance of the agricultural sector therefore plays a very vital role in the economic growth of our country. So continuing about the place or the role of agriculture in Indian economy, we find that there is a relationship between rural communities and agriculture, and this is in transition. From a situation where agriculture was the major driving force to a new state which increasingly non-agricultural factors have started influencing the nature of rural economy. Still, the overall growth of the Indian economy has depended much on the performance of agriculture because it's one of the sectors that provides employment to about 65% of the total population. So with a share of 2.7% of the world's agricultural production, India is ranked 6th in the world. So, agriculture, as we know, is playing a very important role in Indian economy. So, let's see the contributions of agriculture to our economy. So, when it comes to the contribution to Indian economy, we find that agriculture and allied activities contribute to about 59% of the total national income. When it comes to the sources of livelihood, we find that two-thirds of the population of India are directly engaged on agriculture. And about food supply, we find that it's estimated that around 60% of our household consumption is met by agricultural products. Moving on to the revenue to the government, agriculture is a major source of revenue to both the central and the state government. And coming to the exports or the contribution of agriculture to exports, we find 50% of the exports are basically from agriculture. So we have not just manufacturing sectors, we have jute, cotton textiles, sugar, etc. also contributing to about 20% of our total exports. So 50 plus 20 adding up to about 70% of India's exports are basically from agriculture. So this again is contributing to the earning of foreign exchange to our country. Coming to the industrial development, we find it's a major source of raw materials to various important industries like cotton, jute, textiles, sugar, edible oils. And commercial importance, we find that it's playing a major role in both internal and external trade of the country. Whether it is coffee, tea, sugar, cashews, spices, they all are the main items of exports. So when we look into the contribution of agriculture to the GDP, we find the share of agriculture to GDP is slowly, increasing, and it's about 19.9% or rounding off to 20% of the first time in the 17 years, so making it the sole bright spot of GDP during 1920-21. So according to the economic survey of 2020-21, we find there is a positive growth of agriculture. So the resilience of the farming community in the face of adversities made agriculture the only sector to have clocked a positive growth of 3.4% at constant prices in 2020-21. So we all know we faced the pandemic of corona, so there was a lot of negativity happening, agricultural production being closed, lockdown. With all the issues, we find that agriculture did find a positive note and there was an improvement in terms of its production and contribution. And the share of agriculture to GDP has also increased from 17.8% in 2019-20 to 19.9% in 2020-21. And the last time the contribution of the agricultural sector to GDP was about 20% was about in 2003 and 2004. So we find that this is a very positive uh, happening in terms of agriculture. So let's move on to the next topic or the issue, that is the composition of rural economy of India. So when it comes to composition, we find that an economy can be subdivided into two economies, that is the rural economy and the urban economy. This is done on the basis of the size of settlement and the type of economic activities undertaken by the inhabitants. So the rural economy is defined by the predominance of agriculture or any activities related to agriculture and allied activities. So here the mainstay of the people living in rural areas is they are dependent on agriculture or allied activities. So apart from agriculture, manufacturing and service sectors are also prevalent in the rural economy, but it is to a very small extent, or to some extent we find that it is prevalent. So to begin with, we describe the fact that the rural economy is composed of many and large variety of economic activities. So one of the largest component and that which provides the pulse of the rural economy is agriculture. It consists of crop cultivation pertaining to various kinds of cereals, pulses, oilseeds, fruits, vegetables, etc. So together with its allied activities like livestock, which provides milk and milk products, meat and meat products, it constitutes a major supplier of food and food articles, raw materials and finished and semi-finished products. So another nature-based activity which broadly forms a separate sector and its allied activities to agriculture is forest. So its major products include industrial wood, fuel wood of various types used for innumerable purposes in innumerable ways. So there is, besides minor forest produce like bamboos and canes, beedi leaves, lac, etc. Another sector of agriculture consists of fishing, constituted of both inland fish and marine fish. The rural economy also depends on village and rural industries. There is mostly traditional industries, which is basically artisan based. So the products are quite unique, and it includes khadi, leather, etc. So moving on to rural economy, we find that whether a country is developed or underdeveloped, we find there are two aspects of economy. One is the rural economy, other one is your urban economy. So the rural economy always faces many issues. So in India also, we find that rural area also has many issues or problems, like we have the burden of agriculture, we have lack of capital, lack of investment in agriculture, seasonal unemployment, disguised unemployment, and many issues. So main activities or the primary activities of the rural areas include agriculture, and apart from that we find animal husbandry, milk livestock, fishery, horticulture, floriculture, poultry, etc. The rural sector consists of two main subsectors of agriculture and non-agricultural sector. So how we classify them as rural and urban, we also have something called as agriculture and the non-agricultural sector. So the agricultural sector consists of the agriculture and allied industries, crop, animal husbandry, dairy, fisheries, poultry, etc. The non-agricultural sector consists of industry, business and services, cottage industries, village industries, khadi, handlooms, handicrafts, etc. So business refers to micro enterprise, shops, traders, etc. And service industries include transport, communication, banking, hospitality, etc. So we may try to say that if we want India to be developed country or to have a more focus on rural economy, or we want to see a change, transformation happening in terms of rural economy, then we would say that we have to concentrate on these three sectors. That is, one, agriculture and its allied sector. Secondly, non-farm sector comprising of small scale and cottage industries. Thirdly, rural consumer from the perspective of fast moving consumer goods. That is what we call as FMCG, and the durable goods industries. So we move on to the next aspect of this session, that is the farm sector and the non-farm sectors. So farm sector, as we all know, the rural economy comprises of the two subsectors, that is the farm sector and the non-farm sectors. So the farm sector includes, or the farming activity includes, agriculture, basically that is crop production. It could be anything like your wheat, sugar, rice, ragi, jowar, etc. Plantation, animal husbandry. We have basically, if it's for meat or it could be for milk, etc. We have forestry, we have logging, and we have fishing, etc. So the non-farm sector, it includes where activities like agro-processing industries are more, which is like wholesale or retail trading happening. You need to store them, then you need to transport them, and you need to provide all these service activities given more importance. So it includes communication, transportation, education, health industries, all any activities related to basically service industries. So they all come in your non-farm sectors. So moving on to the function, we find that over the time economy moves and it tends to be transformed. So change is a natural process. We always see there is transformation happening in all forms of life, society, same with our economy. So transformation here means movement or transition of economy from one stage to another stage. It is basically a stage of development. So it is like you're moving from one aspect to another. But this is happening because we see there is development happening in the different sectors. So the well-known pattern of transformation that has been experienced by the countries at different stages of development is the movement from agriculture, that is farm, to manufacturing and then to services. So we find that the change is happening from agriculture to manufacturing and then to services. As an economy advances, technology over time, importance of the farm sector in terms of its share in GDP, share in total employment gets reduced, and the share of the other sectors increase gradually, and they follow this path. So the other two sectors gradually move on. So the path that we see is farm or agriculture transforming to manufacturing or industries, that in turn moving or transforming to services. So just try to put this in a picture form, wherein the farm or the agriculture sector moves towards manufacturing and industry, and finally towards the services. So farmers in rural areas are basically dependent on the market for the purchasing of inputs as well as selling of the farm output. So market expands, and so farmers' supply decisions are more or less influenced by the market signals, that is the market prices for inputs Through the linkages between farm and the non-farm sectors have existed. So we find this linkage is not something new. This has been there, from age-old barter system. With technological advancement, this linkage is getting stronger and becoming multi-dimensional. So agriculture plays a very important role in promoting the growth and diversification of the non-farm sector in the rural areas, as it uses more inputs like modern agricultural implements and chemical fertilizers. On the other hand, agriculture supplies its output to the agro-processing industries. Also, there may be a possibility of reinvestment of the profit in one sector to another sector. So structural transformation of the farm sector becomes an indicator of overall development. So it is a farm sector that which determines the pattern and the nature of the structural shift in the rural non-farm sectors. We call this as the RNFS. It's the rural non-farm sectors. So we have tried to depict the various aspects of the rural economy in this video. So let's summarize as to what we have discussed. We discussed about the structure of Indian economy. We discussed about the three stages that we see in the history of Indian economy, that is the pre-colonial stage, colonial stage, and the post-colonial stage. We also discuss about the three aspects of, or the three sectors of Indian economy: primary sector, secondary sector, and the tertiary sector. We also discuss about the role or the place of agriculture in Indian economy. So we try to discuss about how it has contributed to our industries, foreign exchange, GDP, etc. We also discussed about the composition of Indian rural economy. We discussed about the agricultural and the non-agricultural sector as well. And we discussed about the farm sectors and the non-farm sectors. So, I would like to conclude by saying that creating this video gave me an immense pleasure. So I hope my students would benefit from viewing this video and would be as useful as what I have intended it to be. Thank you.